He fights Junior Asunciao and wins with a guillotine. And then he had a couple of fights in there where he was really doing good. And if you take a look, he was fighting pretty often. Take a look at, 2007, 2008, 2008. 3 fights a year. That's a norm. That's when you're fighting in the UFC. That's a good number. He fights Kurt Pellegrino. That's where he does like the double flips and things like that. But he really is the younger brother of Nick. And that's the way people were looking at him. And they looked at him all the way through all of these fights. And he had some great fights. Josh Neer was a tough fight, man. If you remember who Josh Neer was, the dentist. Yeah. He had a back and forth battle with Josh Neer. It was awesome. And he ends up getting the win by decision. He lost to Clay Guida on a split decision. He lost to Joe Stevenson. Comes back, beats Melvin Gillard by submission. Loses to Gray Maynard on a split decision, then beats him later on, knocks him out, if you recall, just a little bit later. But there was that moment where you were looking, and he was always that younger brother of Nick, and then he had the Donald Cerrone fight. I'm sorry, he had the fucking Takanori Gomi fight, who was, if you remember, Nick fought Takanori Gomi in Pride in Las Vegas.
Yep, I was there.
Right? And Nick put it on Takanori Gomi after Takanori Gomi put it on Nick. He cut Nick up, had Nick, big old cuts under his eyes, and he was so tired in the fight. He's trying to point to the referee, to look at his eyes, you need to stop this fight. And Nick just kept coming. Nick ends up catching him in a go-go plata. And then Nathan gets the shot to fight Takanori Gomi, and he submits him by an armbar. And that was the start. That was when all of a sudden people started to look at him and they go, man, he's very much like his brother, and he got a win against Gomi. Then he fought Donald Cerrone. And when he fought Cowboy, if you recall that fight, Josh,
that was nasty.
He put it on Cowboy. I mean, no one would have thought Cowboy would have gotten beaten in the stand-up as bad as he got beat against Nate in that fight. It just was Nate's night. It wasn't Cowboy's fight. He beats Jim Miller. Then he loses a couple of fights, Benson Henderson, and he loses to you in the first fight that he actually gets stopped in. And you look at all these fights, and there are all these good fights, and he gets these wins, and he's always talking and building himself up. But it was finally when he got to the Conor McGregor. That taking of that fight, I think he took it on 10 days notice because Conor was supposed to fight. Who was Conor supposed to fight in that damn
Rafael dos Anjos?
RDA. Remember the red panty night? They had the whole thing and stuff and everything. And he pulls out, I think, broken foot or something like that. And then he gets the win against Conor. And that's what, again, it's the attitude, and it was the belief in himself of, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers. Hey, that was it, because he wasn't. He's like, I can beat this guy. And he coming in, there's a lot of people that had no belief that he could beat Conor. And okay, I was one of the ones that, people were saying I was an idiot, thinking, hey, I'm telling you right now, man, that fight hits the ground, he's going to beat Conor, and on the feet, it's going to be close. Conor's faster, no doubt about that. The southpaw is going to be a little bit different for both of them, but don't be surprised that if Nate Diaz tags Conor multiple times, he fires shots from odd angles and you don't see him coming, and he'll hit you. And from that point, his career, he didn't have that many fights, but every time he fought, it was special. And it was after the fight, what he would do was special. Because when he fought Anthony Pettis, and I honestly believe that was one of Pettis' best fights. Pettis fought a great fight against Nate Diaz, broke his hands, and they ended up stopping the fight. But, Nate, again, the pressure just overtook Pettis in the fight. But afterwards, he set up the BMF. He set that whole thing up with Masvidal. He helped make Masvidal. Let's just be honest. Okay? In that moment, based upon Masvidal coming off of, the Ben Askren flying knee, 5-second knockout. He's a bad motherfucker. You know what? That's the kind of guys I want to fight, bad motherfuckers. And he creates it. And it's all of these things as they go. The UFC is eating it up because they have him under contract and everything is good. And then it gets to the point where the whole thing with the Masvidal before it, that was where things start to change a little bit. Because what happened before it? Usada. Usada comes in and says, oh, he's dirty. Here's a guy that is a vegan. He does a ton of cannabis, but he doesn't take anything bad as far as, performance enhancing, anything like that. And they come in and they say he's dirty, and the UFC tells him, hey, you know what? Let's get through the fight and we'll handle this. And he goes, nope, I'm done. I'm out. He says, I haven't taken shit. I don't know what the fuck they're testing, but they can kiss my ass. I'm out. And this is the kind of thing that, when you look at a guy that is willing to say, I don't care, I'll step away. It's not easy to do, man. It's tough, and he did that. And from that point, it seemed like they were like being slow with him.
Yeah.
And there's big drops between now COVID, might have been part of that and stuff. But this is a guy that was a moneymaker for him. And they knew he was coming to the end of that contract. And after that Leon Edwards, that whole year, Josh, he's asking, you got all the tweets. We saw all the tweets and stuff that he put out with, hey, I'm available to fight on this and that. And what they were doing. They did exactly what, we talk about what promoters do. I'll give you a guy that's bad for you. So if you, in the contract, if you turn it down, your contract extends. Well, his contract kept extending, to that point where he finally takes the fight with the guy that they want to give him because they want him to go out on the loss. And if you look at it, something up there said, nope, we're not going to have that fight happen. And it didn't. And he fights Tony Ferguson and he walks off with a win. And you look at it and go, overall, I love it.
Well, I had said last week, the week before, actually, I was like, in our movie show, I wanted him to go out a little bit special because he's brought so much to the table. He
did.
And this, in a weird, fucked up way, it all worked out.
Oh, it worked out.
Because
I don't know how.
I got nothing but respect for Tony. He came in and he decided to take the fight as well. You gotta give credit where credit's due. Tony stepped up and took the fight. Nate said, you know what? Nate could have taken his show money or whatever his money was and just been like, no, I was here. I made weight. I'm out. You guys, that's it. It is what it is. He didn't do that. He showed who he was as a person. He came out and he put on a show. Some people liked it. Some people didn't. They were criticizing, oh, they looked old. They looked this. You guys, you don't ever fight the same way when your opponent's changed the day before, or whereas Khabib had like 5 changes in a week. You're not the same fighter. No. You were preparing for one guy. And that's not who he was preparing for. Tony was a different fighter than Chimaev. Let's be honest. Completely different fight. But go back down, Dave, where Nate came into where he won the Ultimate Fighter. John, I gotta say the same type of things that you were just saying. I look when he beat Manny Garbarian, and I remember him being, oh wow, I already knew from Nate. I already knew, or not Nate, but Nick, how good his brother was. I had already done like a grappling match against him. Kind of knew him, from around. He had fought in Strikeforce. All of these things. He wins the Ultimate Fighter, and I was like, all right, he's making his way. But then as he goes up, the fight that I really started paying attention to him was Kurt Pellegrino, where he flexes, does the middle birds, like to everyone. That was a personality that we never really got from Nick. We got a little bit of that, like, come fight me with the Robbie Lawler fight, but we didn't get you know what I mean? We didn't get a lot of that showman during the fight. He was, like during the Robbie Lawler fight, let's fight. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But this, with Nate, he had a different way about him that people started clamoring for. He was doing it during the fight. He was talking to you during the fight. He was pointing his fingers at you. He wanted you to engage. He did things different than his brother. His brother did it fantastic as well. But I paid attention to him for the Kurt Pellegrino fight. But then the Josh Neer fight, I think, just catapulted him. That was a great fight. It was back and forth, the split decision, the battle between, they're both kind of tall, long, and lanky. Both had more of a boxing-centric type style of fighting. You know, it was a great fight. Then he comes on, he loses to Clay Guida. Scroll down there for me, Dave. So he loses to Clay Guida, but like we said, in the history of their fighting, then he loses to Joe Stevenson. Wrestlers. In the history of the Diaz brothers, it's always been the wrestlers that have been able to beat him. Nick had a hard time with Diego Sanchez and guys that would just wrestle him. Nick had a hard time with guys that would just wrestle him. Clay Guida, Joe Stevenson. Then you put him against Melvin Gillard. Gets the finish. Goes on, fights Gray Maynard, another wrestler. Had a hard time with him. Gray was able to stand a lot more and stuff like that, but there was some, there's some fights that a lot of the times he had a hard time was with wrestlers. Roy Markham, stand-up guy. Marcus Davis, stand-up guy. You get to, I don't remember who Kim was. Okay, Rory McDonald, stand-up guy, but went up to 170. Got thrown around. Around like a rag doll. You can almost tell like he was kind of checking where he wanted to be at because he went up to 170. He's like, look, I don't want to keep killing myself to make 55. Then as he after those fights, he made his run. He came back to 55 and fought Gomi. Fantastic fight, dominant fight, great fight, and he gets the armbar. Then he fights Donald Cerrone. Do you recall in that fight, I think it was going into the third round, he's bouncing around, pointing at Donald Cerrone. He's pointing at him, just letting him know, like, hey, I'm still here, buddy. Like, I've been putting it on you this whole fight. You haven't touched me at all. Donald Cerrone had never been shut down like that in any fight. He let all the trash talk get to him. He let all the buildup get to him. He let all that stuff at the weigh-ins. He let everything get to him. And Donald Cerrone shut down in that fight. He was not the same fighter. He was getting hit from all different angles. He was getting hit with combinations. He was just getting destroyed. Yeah. It was something we had never seen from Donald Cerrone on him being dominated like that. That's when that catapulted him to Jim Miller. And then he just dominated Jim Miller. I believe he caught him in a submission, right? With the guillotine. Oh, yeah. Yep. Caught him. And Jim Miller was kind of a wrestler / grappler, good stand-up. But that was another wrestler that he had to face that he knew was going to try to take him down, weather the storm, get through his submissions. Nate Diaz then goes on to fight for the title, loses to Benson. Didn't have a great fight. I watched that fight very strong. I watched it because we were already part. I believe we were already part. Strikeforce had already been bought, I think, when that fight happened. And I think it was 2012. I think it was. It was like either right before that or right shortly after that. I was watching that fight, and Nate had moments, but Benson was just a step ahead. Then he fought me, and then he goes on. He fought Gray Maynard, and he was able to put Gray away
for the third time.
Yeah, for the third time. They fought in the Ultimate Fighter.
They fought the Ultimate Fighter, and he submitted Gray.
Did he submit him?
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking that the time when Gray knocked himself out.
I want to say it was
against,
a triangle. That was
Emerson.
Against. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but then I want people to remember this. I believe it was the Michael Johnson fight. That is the fight at the end. He goes, Conor McGregor, I'm the fucking money fight. Remember me? I'm the guy. You want a fucking money fight?
You're taking everything from me.
Yep. I'm the fucking money fight.
That's it.
And the UFC did what the UFC did to basically get him to kind of go. They brought him in on last minute's notice, like they did to Chad Mendez. They brought him in on last minute. It's to give him some notoriety because Conor was skyrocketing. Conor was their moneymaker. Conor was the guy. And they were setting him up for failure.
Of course.
And Nate Diaz knew, all I got to do is win this fight. Grin and bear all the shots he can take. My chin can hold up. As this fight goes on and my pressure comes through, you won't be there. And that's what Nate has done his career. He's put pressure on people and broke them.
The real question is, going back at that, and this is what kind of amazes me, and I'm sorry for breaking up your thing.
No.
But Conor, up to that point, really hadn't shown a weakness in getting tired. And even in the Chad Mendes fight, you know, he was underneath Chad for a bit and he kept fighting. But he came out and actually, you know, was hitting Chad with those, you know, teeps to the body and broke down his body and wins the fight. I really would have liked to know what Nate or his team saw that told them, hey, this guy can be pushed and broken as far as cardio. Or maybe he just found it out that night.
I think honestly they probably saw it in the Chad Mendes fight.
Really?
Because he had a full camp. Now, the only thing is, how many people believe that story that Conor McGregor apparently told Dana, I'm going to let him just shoot and shoot and shoot. I'm going to make him work for 2 rounds. I'm going to finish him. That Conor apparently told Dana White that, like, the day at weigh-ins or whatever. He's like, no, he's a wrestler. He's just going to try to shoot and shoot and shoot. I'm going to let him take me down, but I'm going to make him work for it. And by the second round, I'm going to knock him out. And I believe that's kind of where this, around the Aldo fight and the Chad Mendes fight, they started calling him Mystic Mac because of all these types of things, because Dana had backed the story. I don't know how true that is. I don't know how much I want to believe it. But in that fight, I'm watching that fight going, there's a difference between when you looking tired and you letting someone take you down, but he looked tired. He looked exhausted. And when you make him work, when you make him wrestle, you make him use his arms. Yeah, when you make it, maybe it was. Look, that's been known, like the way people look and they look all frazzled with their longer hair, it does make them look a little bit more tired. But he just had that, like, his arms were down a little bit more. The speed wasn't there. His accuracy on the punches. He wasn't throwing them and bringing them back like he did in the Eddie Alvarez fight. He was lunging a little bit more. He was leaving himself out there to be countered. And that's where he ran into the problems. If you go back and watch the fight with Nate, he was throwing and then Nate was beating him to the combination after that. So Conor would throw and Nate would throw 2, but then Nate would throw 3 and 4 where Conor would throw 1 and 2. Yeah. And the person who lands the last shot is the one that always wears on your mind. As you're out there, like, it's no different than I told the story earlier, John. It's my first time sparring, my first several times. I'm getting hit more by myself. And you start questioning everything you're doing. Now, when you're a fighter, you're in there and you're landing the hard shot, but then you get hit at the end and you back out of the combination going, I lost that exchange. Shit. When in reality, maybe you landed the harder, cleaner shot. Yep. But you're the one mentally thinking, because fighting's such a mental sport, you're in the one mentally thinking going, I lost that exchange. Now you got to get it back. So you try harder. And Conor was losing. He was winning the battle of the harder shots. But Nate was hitting him with the slap at the end. Or Nate was hitting him with like a little combination
he hit him with the Stockton
to the
slap.
shoulders. You know what I mean? And so at the end of that, Conor's going, I got to hit you again. I got to hit you again. I got to hit harder. And that fatigued him even more. Yep. And if you let Nate get under your skin, it works against you even more. I mean, like, I brought in a guy named Rambo from Hawaii, and he just talked trash to me the whole time I was sparring with him. I always brought him in on the 5th round, and when I was getting ready for Nate, and I would just have him talk trash to me, and he knew I was dog dead tired. He knew I was exhausted. So I was prepared for when Nate started talking trash to me when things weren't going my way. And it worked. I got to be honest. As soon as I threw one kick and Nate points at me, he's, what, bitch? You just fucking kick me all day? What? That's it, pussy? Like, those are the things that mentally, we're literally like 30 seconds into the fight and he's talking shit already. But mentally, it did help me a lot. It helped me prepare for it because I learned my lesson with the KJ Noons fight. He started talking to me and he wasn't even talking shit to me. He was just talking to me and it made me feel awkward. It made me feel uncomfortable. I was like, this is not right. But to go back to what you were saying, there's certain fighters in my career that I look at, not people that I fought, that I've looked up to in terms of, hey, you've helped change the game in the sport. And Nick and Nate Diaz are at the top of the list.
They're definitely up there.
To me, it's BJ Penn at the very top, because if you guys just understood how much BJ Penn did that nobody else did beforehand. The way that the UFC structures their contracts now is strictly because of him. There's so many. He went off and started his own promotion.
So we can blame him.
We can blame him, yes. We can blame him for all the things right now the fighters have to go through in terms of. But I look at the way that the sport has been shaped, and there's certain fighters that it's been shaped around. Yeah. And Nick and Nate are at the top of the list, man. And when I go back and I look at this, then he went on, like you said, with the Usada situation. He understood what he possessed. He possessed
power,
the ability to control the power.
Yep.
He's like, look, I know all that trash you talked about me moving the needle. It's all bullshit. I am the money fight. Everyone knows I'm the money fight. George Masvidal knows he's the money fight. Nate Diaz is the money fight. They put that fight together, but that was the bad motherfucker belt. John, I'm glad you reminded me because I forgot about that.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Sure, maybe he came out on the losing end of that stick.
But he didn't lose.
He didn't lose.
It's the one thing about him that is remarkable, Josh, is for a guy that, he's got a lot of losses in his career. Mm-hmm. He doesn't lose ground off of those losses. And it's because of the way that he fights, the intensity when he steps in there, there is, I don't quit. I just keep coming forward. I just keep on going after you. And people, that resonates with him. It makes it to where people go, I don't care if he lost. Even the Leon Edwards thing at the end, where you look, Leon beat him for 4 rounds cleanly and was beating him in the 5th until, what was it? Maybe a minute left in the fight. And he lands that shot and he points to him like, oh yeah. That right there changed everybody's opinion about that fight. Because now everyone's opinion isn't that Leon Edwards, spanked him in all those rounds. It is Nate Diaz almost had him out and should have. That's the way people were looking at it.
But here's the thing, though, John. They offered him that fight knowing that if he won that fight, they could potentially put him into a title shot that would potentially extend his contract for more fights.
True.
Let's not forget
Good
that.
Point.
They
Good
did
point.
it for their needs. You guys at home, the contracts are structured. They only gave him the Leon Edwards fights because if he won that fight, that was a logical reason to give him a Usman fight. And who else would want that fight besides him? Usman. Give me the money fight. The champ wants the money fight. The money fight is who? The money fight is Nate Diaz. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter. Look, people can criticize what I'm saying right now, but there's no way the UFC was looking at their best interest because had he knocked out Leon Edwards, that would have put him into a title shot. As soon as you get a title shot, that extends your contracts for 3 more fights. As soon as you get a title, because they can't have you losing. They can't have you losing and then walking away. Oh, now that guy just fought for the UFC title. Now he goes and fights another promotion and gets mopped. No, they want to hold you for 1 or 2 more fights after that. So you lose those ones as well or try to get you beat, or they try to build you back up if you resign, or they try to get you signed for more money for that title shot. So, you're going to fight Usman. Let's sign you for a 6-fight deal then, and I'll pay you this much more money for these big fights.
Yep.
That's how they get you. They knew what they were doing. They knew he was on his last fight of his contract. The way that Nate Diaz has handled everything, the USADA thing was very key. I can't say it enough. Every young fighter, if the UFC comes to you and says, we'll talk about it after, this was eye-opening. This was very eye-opening.
Especially when you know, I haven't taken anything.
Yeah. Be
in control.
Yeah. Nope.
Ride with it.
You got to look what they did the same thing with John Jones, right?
Yeah.
He had tested. They said wait till after it came out negative or came out that he took whatever dick pills or whatever it was, and the suspension still stood up. Other fighters have done the same thing. They've tested, and then after, okay, we got the fight out of you. Now you're going to serve your suspension because that's no loss to us. It's just extended your contract.
Yep.
This came up. He's like, fuck you. I'm not taking anything. I've never taken anything other than weed. And this is what he's going to do. I'm not fucking fighting this fight. They knew it was a big ass deal. You got The Rock out there presenting them the belt.
Oh, fuck yeah.
It was a big deal.
That's in Madison Square Garden. It is the main event. Yeah. It's everything. They put a ton of money into the promotion of that.
Yeah. They made a fucking belt, John. They made a fucking belt.
A $50,000 belt, supposedly.
Yeah. And so this is a big, when I said him and his brother have helped change the sport. BJ Penn to me is right there at the top. These guys have helped change the sport as well. These guys Nick and Nate deserve so much credit. And John, you said this, and I was reading the comments. People are like, oh man, everyone loves Chimaev. They love Chimaev because he won. But I want to remind people that you're going to find out the reason why people continue to love Nick and Nate and BJ Penn and other fighters that are like this GSP, they're fucking real. John said it without me even having to talk to you about it, is that they are real fucking people. What you see is what you get. That's not true for every fighter.
No, it's not.
When you see them
not
changing,
even close.
When you see them winning fights and they're changing how they dress, they're changing how they look, they're not real. These guys are still running around in fucking Cortezes in Dickie jeans and pants and shit with white shirts. The only brand they rep is their represent brand. That's all they wear. They represent their shit. And BJ is the same exact way. All he's repped is his Ruka. His Ruka, which is his friend's brand. That's all he's ever done. They are real people. GSP is real to himself. You go through and follow these guys on social media, they don't change. This is exactly who they are, and they make it very clear. That's why he didn't. That's why they haven't lost fans. That's why they'll continue to be who they are, and they're going to be a mainstay no matter where they go. I wish them nothing but the best. I admire everything they've done in the sport. I can't say enough about them. Absolutely can't say enough about them.
I agree. And we'll see.
We've exhausted that.
Well, but the best part about this is, I don't want to say that Nate won. You know, Nate worked his way through a situation that is very difficult to work your way through. Look, you're going against the giant, and it's not an easy thing to be that person that's always getting, stepped on, and you're getting stepped on. Okay. The giant is stepping on you. He's kicking you. He's moving you. He's forcing you, trying to make you do those things that are going to work for him. Nate just sticks with what he's doing and worked his way all the way to the point where, hey, I'm going to do this last fight. He knew it was a bad fight for him. And, somehow we talk about the MMA gods, or, there are MMA gods out there, and somehow he ends up not fighting him. He walks away with the win, and let's see what he does. I'm being honest when I say I think, everything that he said at the end of that, I thought he was very smart in what he said. And he thanked Dana, and he thanked the UFC, and he said, hey, I may be back. And honestly, I think he will be. I think eventually you will see that he's going to do something outside in the boxing. We've talked about it. You're the one that brought up, he's going to fight Jake Paul long ago. Honestly, you're the first person I ever heard say that it's going to be Nate Diaz.
Yep.
And I do think he's going to fight Conor again. Where he's going to fight Conor? Probably in the UFC. Go to zbiotics.com/weighing in. You will get 15% off of your order.